When I was growing up, the world in which I lived was one where respect for nature, so for young people today, the sense that there may not be any nature, that the entire world's survival is dependent upon how we deal with climate change, I think is a much more dramatic and consequential set of issues. I would just say that those of us in the universities of the world, in the academy, are deeply admiring of what young people are doing in the area of climate. The attention that the youth are bringing to these issues, the energy, the desire to learn, the desire to act. This is exactly what a university in its ideal form is meant to do. So I think when I was growing up, the world in which I lived was one where respect for nature, wilderness, national parks, the sense of having respect for nature was a key theme of the time. So this is the 1950s and 60s and into the 70s. In that period, people like Aldo Leopold and John Muir and Thoreau and others really were very prominent thinkers about how to respect the natural world in an increasingly urban, industrial environment. And when I was young and living in a small town in eastern Oregon, working for the Forest Service, working for the Bureau of Land Management, going into the wilderness was something that was really prized. I think it's out of that era that my own personal views about climate change evolved. So for young people today, the sense that there may not be any nature, that the entire world's survival is dependent upon how we deal with climate change, I think is a much more dramatic and consequential set of issues. So between my generation and this generation, I think there's been a shift, not in respect for nature, not in how to think about nature, but in, and not just protecting it, but the very survival of the human species is at stake. And that lends, I think, a very different perspective on it, and one that I feel as deeply as anyone. So I think universities are places that need to nurture the new generation and need to educate, pass knowledge on. But it's also a place where the younger generation, youngest members of the society tell the world and tell universities, tell the world through universities, what it is that they care about and what it is that they think. And universities provide this, kind of nexus, this point at which the older generation passes on knowledge and hopefully wisdom and how to think. But the younger generation is also an equal voice in making the future. And universities are at their best when they allow that dialogue to flourish. So I think universities, if we really do our job well, are places where partisan differences, differences in very, very highly debated subjects are really set aside in the interest of trying to understand basic truth, knowledge, and it's almost a banal thing to say, But universities are not about politics, and we're not about advancing a party or a particular ideological view. We are about knowledge and reason and the public good. It's critically important that universities provide this foundation of research, foundation of passing on knowledge. But it's also important that universities provide this space in the world, not only physical space, but also mental space, where true public problems and issues can be addressed in a nonpartisan way. So I view universities as critically important in a time of highly polarized politics, which clearly we're in now. And my hope is that we can sustain that role. It's not easy. And sometimes people doubt that we are really committed to that, but we are. And that's what we should be, a place where really important human problems can be addressed in a nonpartisan, non-political way. So Columbia, of course, is an institution like all institutions, organizations, corporations, nonprofit. I mean, we are an institution, and so we have to take steps ourselves to deal with climate change, our own impact on climate change. And we are doing that. There's a climate action plan for Columbia, getting to net zero by 2050 and so on. Very, very important. And a lot of people have worked very hard to have Columbia's climate plan for itself. More generally, and I think of greatest importance, is that we fulfill our mission to educate younger people about issues of the time and pass on the knowledge, but we also do research on critically important issues to the nation and to the world. Columbia has led in this area that is now referred to as climate change or global warming. It was here at the very famous Lamont Doherty Research Observatory that the idea of global warming was first put forward by Wally Broecker, who was a very famous scientist. And from then until now, of course, it was long in effect, but from then until now, really, really important path-breaking research has been done at Lamont Doherty, but all across the institution, in the engineering school, in arts and sciences, and in the professional schools. We have tried to organize that, make it more effective, created the Earth Institute, been a very powerful example of bringing together people from different disciplines. But now we've taken a very dramatic step of doing the thing that is most consequential within the academic world, and that is we have decided to create a school of climate. And what that means is that you can hire faculty and have the power of tenure and promotion, that we will have our own student body, taking courses, in this case graduate courses, and the area of climate. And this will propel Columbia into the forefront of the teaching, the education, and the research on climate. Many schools across the university already are doing work on climate, so it will be synthesizing those efforts, but also advancing our own effort in the School of Climate. So that was announced just in 2020, and we're very proud of it. It's the first school at Columbia to be created in a quarter century. And this is something you only do as a university 2 or 3 times, perhaps a century. And we've decided that this is such an important human problem to address, and a world problem to address, that we need to build out a school to help us deal with it. So everything from trying to be more careful with our own practices to doing our very best in our mission of education and research and action. Everything I'm very proud of what Columbia is doing. Here I think we have much to do. Every institution has an impulse to want to compete for faculty, for students, for prestige, wants to have its own autonomy, all of which completely understandable and in many ways beneficial. But on something that is as crucial as climate and climate change and all of the ramifications of that for humanity, it's really only going to be through these cooperative, collaborative efforts that we make real change. And so we're reaching out to other institutions to try to do that in the area of climate. And I think every institution that can respond in that kind of way will make it better for the world. I would just say that those of us in the universities of the world, in the academy, are deeply admiring of what young people are doing in the area of climate. The attention that the youth are bringing to these issues, the energy, the desire to learn, the desire to act. This is exactly what a university in its ideal form is meant to do, to combine the ideals of youth, the knowledge of universities, and the power of research and critical thinking to the great problems of humanity. And I'm deeply, deeply admiring and grateful to young people for fulfilling that in the context of our universities.